I believe there's 2.2 billion people on Earth who have $10,000 or more of net worth. So there's your group of people who have any amount of money, a meaningful amount of money to store. And so 10 million out of 2 billion is 0.5%. So we're currently at 0.5% penetration of adoption of Bitcoin as a savings vehicle among people who have an interest in savings, in savings technology, or should have an interest in how they're storing their money. So, right there, that's way earlier than you would have thought, right? Because Bitcoin's been around. There's these big numbers attached to it. It got all the way to 70,000. That's a 5-digit number right there. That's really big. But then you realize that based on the numbers on chain, it's right there. Anybody can check it. There's only 4 million people, and rounded up to 10 for exchanges. That's only 0.5% of the world. And when you think about the adoption curve, the classic tech adoption curve, technology is adopted by society in a bell curve fashion, right? So most people will adopt a new technology around the same time. The mainstream will, whether that's TVs or radios in the past or the internet. The internet was around for quite a few years, as we talked about. And then all of a sudden in the late 90s, it exploded because it finally reached some use case, critical mass, some level of penetration into suburbia and the professional world that everyone was talking about it, buzzing about how cool it is that you can send email on American Online, right? And then boom, overnight, it felt like adoption happened. But that was just the mainstream arriving, and it felt like a giant chunk all at once. So in that bell curve, the classic framework for thinking about this is you have your innovators, your early adopters, your early majority, your late majority, and then your laggards. And so obviously your innovators would be your first people to try out this technology. Almost like your Google Glass wearers 10 years ago. That's what I think of when I think of like people who are willing to like try something that's not ready for the mainstream yet, because they are excited enough about technology, or excited or have a painful enough pain point that it pushes them to go through the trouble of setting up something that might be hard to set up still, because the rest of the world hasn't adopted it and hasn't like made the onboarding process very clear. Anyway, so that innovators group, I think, is 2.5% typically. And so if that's 2.5%, but we're only 0.5% into this adoption curve, then we're 1/5 of the way into the very first group of adopters in the bell curve. And that's just what the numbers say. So even though it feels late for Bitcoin, it feels like you missed the boat. It feels like everyone has been talking about Bitcoin for a decade now. So everyone who was ever going to adopt it has already adopted it clearly. And yet these numbers say that almost nobody has adopted it. And the truth is that almost nobody understands Bitcoin for what it really is and what it can do for them, which is as a savings vehicle that has this built-in increasing scarcity that you can rely on to better your financial position over time, and makes it a better savings vehicle than any of the other store of value buckets out there. And so just like the American West, which set in motion the individual decisions based on the incentives inherent to a frontier. There is incentive for people to adopt now ahead of the mainstream. And that's playing out all over the country, all over the world, every day, every month. Some people are finding Bitcoin and people don't unfind Bitcoin.